a lot of the sensations that people feel, if not most of them, maybe even all of them, are from the brain sending the wrong signals to the body, causing these issues, or the brain thinking there's something happening in the body and it triggers these things, just like pain, for example. Why do people get chronic pain when there's nothing happening in their leg? It feels like their thighs are on fire and burning. I know because I felt this for years. Thighs burning, arms burning, head burning. But I go to the doctors, I go to the hospital, nothing is wrong with my legs. My muscles are fine. I didn't pull anything. I didn't, bruise my thighs and arms. Why does it all come on at once? It's because there's a part of the brain that's triggering that pain. So it's actually a head down process for chronic pain versus a bottom to top process.
I can take on anything now in my life.
I'm now currently living a life in which I never thought I would be able to ever live again.
How's it going, Thrivers? Miguel here from CFS Recovery. In this video, we're going to be talking about what hypervigilance feels like and how you know there are still remnants of you being in a hypersensitive nervous system state, in a fight or flight state, on the edge. These are signs that your nervous system is still in this self-defense mode. And these are things you want to work on to get out of having this hypersensitivity. Now, if you're new to the channel, my name is Miguel. I recovered after 4.5 years of going through some very serious health issues, a lot of symptoms I was dealing with that the doctors couldn't really explain. I dealt with over 50 symptoms, I think, at one time. And at my worst, I was also bedridden for about 8 months straight. I was even hospitalized for a couple of months. But after learning how to fix my nervous system, luckily I met a doctor who taught me all these things. And then I went from being completely bedridden in a hospital for a couple months to being in a wheelchair, to using a walker, to getting my life back. And then over the next few years, I've built my life back to where now I can exercise, I can go hiking, I can go traveling, I can work full time. I don't really live within all these limitations that I had when I was dealing with a lot of these mysterious symptoms. And this is coming from somebody who couldn't even lift a spoon to his mouth and had to get spoon fed for that 8-month window when I was very sick. So what does hypervigilance feel like? Well, I'll give you a few examples of some things I went through. And prior to learning about all these principles of how to recover, I didn't really know that these were signs of a hypersensitive nervous system. I didn't even know it was a hypersensitive nervous system. Sometimes I thought I had Parkinson's. Sometimes I thought I had Alzheimer's from the brain fog. Sometimes I thought, my organs were shutting down and my lungs were shutting down. It was terrifying. So I didn't know how to read the signals that my body was telling me. And hypervigilance is one of those signals that is very obvious once you know what to look for. Okay, so let's rewind a little bit and kind of break down some of the basic signs of what's going on if you have CFS or long COVID or fibromyalgia. And very important disclaimer here, as long as you have had all your tests and scans done from the doctors and the specialists and you've tried different methods and treatments and none of those are working, then listen to this information as it may be applicable to you. But always make sure you have all other medical issues ruled out. Now, we all have this stress threshold of amount of stress that our body can handle, not just physically, but also emotionally and cognitively. And for a lot of people who fall into this illness, right, to fall into this debilitation, to fall into this lack of capacity to just go live out their lives, they were very stressed people, or there was a lot of things going on in their lives. I know for myself, I was overworking myself, I was pushing really hard, I wasn't eating right, I was drinking lots of coffees, and all of those stressors compound when you have a very extreme type A personality, which is what I had. I could never take a day off. I had a very hard time slowing my mind down, and I was a perfectionist, overachiever. I always felt like I had to squeeze the most out of every single day, or else I felt guilty if I wasn't working. So essentially, let's say my threshold was over here. I was building up this capacity, and eventually once you go over that maximum stress threshold, that's when you start to feel the symptoms. And so when you go over that, let's say COVID could be the last thing that pushed you over the edge, the final straw that made you go from here, this amount of stress, to this amount of stress, right? And maybe there were things going on in your life. For me, it was also financial stress and, just internal pressure I put on myself, some anxiety. I didn't even realize it was anxiety at the time, but eventually it's almost like the bomb was ticking down and just went off, right? And so once you go over the stress threshold, now that sets off an alarm in your body that you're in danger because your body has reached its maximum amount of stress it can handle. So it starts slowing you down in the form of symptoms, okay? And putting you in this survival mode. Once you're in the survival mode, that's when things can start to snowball. So what does this survival slash hyper-vigilant mode look like? Because that's what it is. It's hyper-vigilant. You know, your brain thinks there's danger around and is trying to reduce the amount of danger by anticipating that something's going to pop up, or you know, you're at risk for some kind of stressor, and it's going to try to prevent you from doing those things. So for example, when I was really in the thick of this stuff, but I was still kind of functional, like I wasn't completely bedridden yet, I was always looking for an escape plan. Okay, so this was very applicable to whenever I went into malls or, you know, shops or restaurants where you had to sit down for a prolonged period of time. Anytime you don't really have a sense of control of the environment or the situation, it's very unpredictable. Your brain doesn't know what's going to happen. It doesn't know if there's going to be loud noises over there, or you know, something's going to happen over here. It always thinks of worst case scenarios. And I remember there were a few instances where this really hit me hard, and one of them I can remember, it was in a mall. Now, to a normal person, going to the mall is basic. That's like nothing. But to people like us, and this may not apply to you fully, but in my case and so many other people's cases, it was difficult for them to show up to social gatherings or even do simple things like going into a big store, you know, going into a mall. So I went into the mall, and there was a lunch that I had with my family, and we had to walk about 3 or 4 minutes into the mall to get to the food court. Okay, now that walk alone was quite a bit of physical stimulus. You know, my capacity was very low at the time, so that alone was stressing me out. But as I got deeper and deeper into the mall, I was just thinking to myself, well, what if my body starts shutting down? What if I start crashing? What if I feel like I can't breathe? You know, where's the escape? Where's the nearest exit? And the deeper and deeper I got into the mall, I just was thinking in my mind, I have to go all the way back out. So what if I have trouble breathing, or I feel like I'm having a heart attack and I need to get fresh air? That's like a 3 or 4 minute walk way down on the other side of the mall, right? So that was one of the early signs where I realized, okay, this is not normal. It's not normal. But at the time, you know, it's real, it's happening. For me, a lot of it was getting the shortness of breath and feeling dizzy and feeling overwhelmed by all the people moving around, and, you know, all the food court people yelling out these different orders. It was just too much stimulation on my body. So going into malls was very difficult. I also remember going to theaters. I only went to it a few times during my time of illness, and that was very difficult because you also get this sense of claustrophobia for some reason. You know, you feel like you can't move around too much, and you're sitting there, and you know you have to sit there for 2 hours, and it's dark and feels cramped up. And to get outside to get some fresh air, it's quite the journey. You have to get up out of your seat, you have to walk out, you have to go through all these different doors, go through the security, and then possibly use some escalators and then get outside. So that sense of needing to control the environment, it was increased whenever I was very hyper vigilant, you know, because you want to be in control of all the factors. I mean, I could barely control my own body, so I needed some sense of control, or at least I felt like I needed some sense of control, because my body would always think of worst case scenarios, right? And not everybody has this when they have CFS or long COVID, but me, I remember I would have lots of panic attacks on top of everything else I was dealing with. And this would typically happen when I was in closed spaces or in places where it was difficult to go outside and get some fresh air, right? There was another time when I was in the car and my dad was driving us, so myself and my brother, I was sitting in the back. We're going to get some pizza. I had all these irrational thoughts, like it didn't even make any sense. And this is another sign that looking back now, you know, these were definite signs of a hypervigilant mind and a nervous system. So we were driving and we were going on the bridge, and at this time, everything is very stimulating for me. This is one of the first times I left the house in maybe 3 weeks. And, you know, we're in the car, they're playing music, and then the road's really bumpy, and we're on a bridge. And I just remember thinking, we're in a giant metal box moving at like 100 kilometers an hour. What if we crash? What if something happens? What if we crash and then the car gets crumpled and I can't escape? And so all these irrational thoughts, intrusive thoughts were popping up. And I remember it felt like I couldn't breathe. So I had to open the window and stick my head out. And by the time we got to the pizza shop, I was just in ruins. I remember I was almost like frozen in the car. And then they just said, you know, just come in and sit down with us and, you know, just hang out. And so we were there. And at the time, I also had extreme food sensitivities. So then I started wondering, well, if I eat this, am I gonna have a reaction? And this was because a few months prior, I actually took this medication from a naturopath and it wiped me out. Like that took me out for about 3 weeks. I didn't sleep for it was over a week straight. Even when they were giving me Ativan, like my body was so wired. They gave me the steroid, the oral steroid, and they said they had to boost my adrenal glands, right? So anyways, I was kind of traumatized from that. So anything that I was ingesting, I'd have a borderline panic attack because I would always think of these worst case scenarios. Then I actually ate the pizza, and within 15 seconds, I felt like I couldn't breathe and I had to go outside to get some fresh air, and I was like sweating, my face was red, and I mean, my body was just in a extremely, extremely hypersensitive, hypervigilant state. So these were signs to look for, and many years later, when I finally learned about the nervous system, whenever I had these thoughts, I was able to identify them and become aware of them and kind of redirect them, right? Or give myself reassurance. So for example, after I got out of the hospital, it's not like all my symptoms went away. I still had nearly all my symptoms. They were just lower in intensity, but the discomfort was still there, but the fear wasn't, because I knew these wouldn't kill me. I knew it wasn't gonna put me in bed for another 2 months. It would be uncomfortable, but it was really in my response to the symptoms that would determine if I'm knocked out for a couple days or a couple weeks at a time. Let's say, for example, there were times when I got out of the hospital and I was just starting to walk around again and drive, and I'd have to go buy some food. So I would go to the mall, and then I'd have the thought walking into the mall, what if I need to go outside? What if I need to escape because I feel like I can't breathe? And then I would tell myself, I would really try to use logic to battle these emotional thoughts. I would tell myself, okay, well, why would you get shortness of breath? I would ask myself that. Well, because I have a hypersensitive nervous system and my body is just, it's like a glitch. The nervous system is kind of like a software for your body. Softwares can have glitches. So your brain is sending the wrong signals, firing these things off. Sometimes there's not always a reason for your symptoms. It's just a glitch in your nervous system. As long as you have had all your tests and scans rule any other medical issues out. And that's why it was so important for me to understand the recovery principles inside and out, to actually talk to somebody who had experience going through this or helping other people go through this at the most severe levels. So since my doctor has seen this before, since he told me you have to do X, Y, Z in order to get better, here's what you do. You're gonna feel like you're dying. You're gonna feel the symptoms blow up your body. You're gonna feel them digging you into a hole, but you can't take the bait. You can't let your emotions pour fuel on that fire, or you can't pour fuel on the fire with those emotions. And I would just logically calm myself down whenever I was dealing with these crazy flare-ups. So with this hypervigilance comes a lot of emotions. And that's what I want you to start thinking about and realizing is when you're anticipating things, when you're about to go to a doctor's appointment and you're thinking, well, if this bad thing happens, then what's the escape plan? What's plan B, right? Or if I'm going to see my friends, like, what is the escape route? We're thinking worst case scenarios. Now, of course, it's good to plan things, but once you plan things, just leave it at that. Don't let that voice in your head keep saying, but what if, what if, what if? Because the truth is a million things can happen and you don't have control over a lot of those things. But what you do have control over is your response to the symptoms and the emotions behind the symptoms. This would also happen when I was first starting to travel. I'd be, getting ready to go to the airport and I'd think to myself, well, once I go in, I'm committing to this trip. There is no turning back. Once I go to that airport and I check through security and I hop on that plane, there is no turning back. And that also made me very hypervigilant thinking about even going on a plane, because there really is no escape plan on a plane. But I had to remind myself, even if that episode were to come up where I feel like I can't breathe and I start feeling overwhelmed, I know the answer. I know what to do. Regardless of the situation, regardless of the symptoms I'm feeling, there is only one solution to it, which is respond the best I can to the symptoms. Now, what does responding well look like? I've made several videos about this. You can actually find one up here. But in a nutshell, responding well to symptoms is keeping your emotions under control, not downward spiraling or snowballing into this fear and impending doom, right? It's going down the path of calmness and safety in your mind and your emotions versus going down the path of fear and anxiety and worst case scenarios. So I'd be on the plane, I'd click my seatbelt and think to myself, all right, well, buckle up. Literally buckle up. We're in for a ride. Like, whatever happens, happens. We know what to do if our body starts going into this hole, or we start to feel like we're crashing. So the biggest thing to take away from this video is just be mindful of when your mind and your thoughts and your emotions are being hyper vigilant, and you're anticipating things and you're having these irrational, intrusive thoughts of worst case scenarios. These are things that your brain puts in front of you to try to keep you stuck in survival mode. And the whole reason you're feeling these symptoms is because you are in a survival state. At least your nervous system is. You may not know that. I didn't know it for years. And most people we work with hundreds of people all around the world, they don't realize it either. They think it's just a physical thing in their body, like their cells are running out of energy or something's going on in their physical organs. And yes, while there may be something's going on, a lot of the sensations that people feel, if not most of them, maybe even all of them, are from the brain sending the wrong signals to the body, causing these issues, or the brain thinking there's something happening in the body and it triggers these things, just like pain, for example. Why do people get chronic pain when there's nothing happening in their leg? It feels like their thighs are on fire and burning. I know because I felt this for years. Thighs burning, arms burning, head burning. But I go to the doctors, I go to the hospital, nothing is wrong with my legs. My muscles are fine. I didn't pull anything. I didn't, bruise my thighs and arms. Why does it all come on at once? It's because there's a part of the brain that's triggering that pain. So it's actually a head down process for chronic pain versus a bottom to top process, which is acute pain. So be mindful of these emotions, be mindful of these things your mind is telling you. I'm not saying this is all in your mind. I'm saying that this is like adding fuel to the fire, the thoughts and emotions. And that's what makes the flare-ups way more intense and stretched out more than they need to be. So if you did want some extra help, if you did want to have these conversations about these things and go even deeper on the topics and identify, okay, what are your hypervigilant thoughts? What are your hypervigilant tendencies that are holding you back in recovery? If you need some help with that, that's exactly what we help people with all around the world. We come up with personalized plans for people to figure out exactly step by step where they are right now in their recovery, what symptoms are they dealing with, what's their history, what are your main roadblocks, and what is a personalized plan that we can implement so that way you can have a step-by-step process of making progress without hitting any plateaus. If that's something you're interested in, then click the link down below. You can apply to see if you're a good fit for one of our programs. And if you are, we would love to provide you some hands-on help and work with you to help you go from surviving to thriving. So hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you got some value out of it. Always remember, you are a thriver and you are just one mind shift away from living a life with thriving health. I'll see you in the next video.
Say that CFS recovery is